Welcome to another episode of ELEV8 at Mdina Partners, this time called Beyond Paychecks, Embracing the EU Pay Transparency Directive for a Fairer Workplace. I'm your host, Katrina, and I'd like to welcome our guests, Karl Dingli, Head of HR at BNF, and Dr. Patrick Farrugia from Tenyards Legal, as we explore the Pay Transparency Directive, how we need to gear up for it, and more importantly, share stories on fostering a fair and inclusive work environment beyond just paychecks. Okay, so I'll start with you, Patrick, because you can understand the jargon.
We'll try and keep it as simple as possible.
Exactly, you've been warned. So if you could just start with really explaining this EU Pay Transparency Directive to those of us who get confused by the law and want to do it right.
Sure.
What are the implications of this policy?
So basically, this directive is not going to come in tomorrow or the day after. So let's just start with that. It's going to take some time. Okay. At this stage, it is still being discussed until it is actually approved by the EU. From then on, then we will have dates from when it will come in. This will be within years, if you're not tomorrow or next week. So let's start off with that. No need to panic, but it is good to be prepared. Let's not repeat many of the mistakes which we saw with the GDPR.
Yes, which came and shocked the system.
2 years in the pipeline, everyone knew about it, nobody did anything. At the last minute, everyone is panicking.
Yeah.
So let's do the same. The same with this one. So basically, the Pay Transparency Directive, it has four main, let's call them pillars, to put it simply. One of them regards employees before they're actually employed, so recruits, potential recruits, while the other three regard employees actually in employment. So the main aim, to start off with, the idea of why the EU is going ahead with this is because the EU is going for its strategy for gender equality. There's a 5-year plan until 2025, and this is in its part of its aim to bring gender equality in terms of pay. So let's start with the four main aspects. So the first aspect regarding pre-employment, a very, very important rule, which I think many people actually assume this is all the directive is about, but it actually is about more. Before actually getting a job, potential employees will have the right to know what salary they're looking at, or at least a band of salaries, because obviously I cannot give you one single salary because it could be depending on your experience, on criteria which you bring along to the job. Lots of other criteria will apply. The second part is for employees then from then onwards. So first, the right for employees to know about their average pay levels. So employees will be able to actually request employers to give them average pay levels within the company, and also broken down by gender. And this is where the gender part starts coming in, where we are trying to align salaries, because there is still a huge disparity, surprisingly enough, even in EU today's day and age. We'd expect that one day would have reached equality. Still, we are quite far off from it. Employers will also be heavily obliged to establish criteria on how they actually do set out their salaries, how they set out the criteria, how they decide who is going to get what salary. Obviously, it goes without saying, I guess, but sometimes we need to explain it in precise words. It has to be based on objective criteria, which do not have anything to do with gender, because that would defeat the whole purpose of gender equality. And lastly, and this is what is probably going to be the most shocking element, is the reporting obligations. Employers, depending on their size, but starting from 100 employees or more, they will have to report on their salary structures broken down by gender. There's lots of maths included in it. I'm not going to go into that.
Sounds
we don't
like
have time.
So
Nor
much
is
fun.
maths. No, it definitely is for someone who likes maths. I'm going to back out of that.
A lawyer for a reason.
As a lawyer for a reason. That's what they always tell us. And surprise, surprise, it's true. No, but as in joking apart, really, there's lots of heavy reporting obligations. Again, the extent of it depends on how large your business is, depending on the number of employees which you employ, but it starts from 100 employees and up. Below 100 employees, there are some obligations, but not as heavy with regards to reporting. This will help obviously bring the national standards out of how pay disparities are actually prevalent in certain countries. In Malta, obviously, the extent of these reports are not going to be that wide, because there aren't many companies who employ 100 or more obviously, if you're going to compare it to larger countries like Germany, Spain, France, huge countries, they're definitely going to have many, many more companies with many employees. This is with everything, with any EU law which we get. It's obviously always catered to larger countries.
We get a lighter version of
Exactly.
it.
We always, we get the version that it is, but then what applies to us is always, much less because we're such a small country, which may come with its benefits, but at the same time, it may come with the downsides because the lack of reporting.
As much,
Exactly, that's it. The lack of reporting might not help us. So that's basically what the law is about: the pre-employment, knowing what your salary will be, the reporting obligations for certain companies, the right to information for your employees to actually know what salary bands they are within and the average salary bands, and also the obligation for the employers to set these criteria, and they have to make them known to their employees as well. Interestingly enough, I was also reading in Japan, if I'm not mistaken, they do have this last requirement where employers must actually set these criteria, and they have to actually publish them officially on their websites, and there are some even certain more obligations. So it gets sort of quite interesting when you start looking at not just Europe, but even outside what happens.
It's really taking the trend, yes.
Definitely.
Super.
I mean, it's going to be a huge obligation, but in a way, it's always for a good cause.
For sure, yeah. And that's it. I mean, we look at these things and get a bit overwhelmed, but in reality,
Exactly.
the purpose behind it is good. Okay, so if I have to move on, Patrick, you're amongst two people who work in the HR field, and Karl has the luxury of being above 100 employees, so he's ready.
Good luck. I heard heavy breathing.
We're taking this, we're here to learn, but also share those stories. What steps, from your opinion, can HR professionals be taking to really ensure that compliance with this directive, is respected, but we're also respecting GDPR and confidentiality that came before? How do we find that sweet spot?
So, to start off with what actually HR can start doing in preparation, first thing, learn about this law. Okay. Information is one of the biggest elements of this law, that you have to inform your employees.
So if they're listening, they're doing the right job.
If they're listening, you're already starting.
Very,
very good start, considering the law is so far away, but you're already trying to learn about it. Excellent job.
Exactly.
So information has to come with education. So it's not only you as HR who have to start learning the law, it is also you who have to teach about this law. So obviously, I'm not expecting HR professionals to teach about the legal jargon and everything, but to get started with the practices that are expected. One of the most important things to keep in mind, let's start with the pre-employment examples, that you have to tell your employees, your potential, employees, recruits, about the salary bands and whatever it is. You have to keep in mind, firstly, the principle of equal pay. And this is where we're going to have a huge effect here in Malta. This comes from a European directive as well, the principle of equal pay for equal work, of equal value, we call it. In principle, in the European law which introduced it, it is for gender purposes, for gender equality purposes. Most countries have implemented it as equal pay between the genders. In Malta, we did not mention the word genders. So here it applies across the board. It could be man versus man as well in terms of equal pay. Obviously, always keeping in mind equal pay for same work, which is of the same value. So the criteria have to be considered, whether it's education, whether it's skills, seniority as well, that all makes a difference. But where the skills, the seniority, whatever it is, are exactly the same, then you get the claim for equal pay, and it would be successful. So in this case, when you are telling your employees in the future, when this law comes in, your recruits, you're telling them this is going to be the salary band, you have to take note of what role that is, and if you have other employees already in that role,
that space,
and you're going to have to see if they align, because if you're offering more, you're going to get the publicity, and this publicity is going to be the main key element, and that's why it is so important to prepare, because the publicity is what's going to bring you down if you're not going to do the work well. You have to start from now, start amending, start seeing your salary scales. I'm pretty sure most companies, once they get to start with exactly, they're already doing this, especially now that they know that these obligations are going to come in so soon. So it would be very, very important to start aligning your salaries, making sure that they are pretty much on an equal basis. There can be differences, Jafir. This is not saying, this new law isn't saying, or the equal pay regulations, they're not saying, listen, everyone has to get the same salary if they do the same job. Not necessarily. It depends on the specific objective criteria, but that's it, objective. So if you have a man and a woman who are doing same role, same seniority, same master's degree or whatever it is, and there's literally nothing else which I can say differs them from each other, then that's the problem. It's going to be, the salary should be, if not the same, almost the same. Obviously, there are always issues of negotiation, and that's one big thing that employers are going to be worried about. How am I going to negotiate if I'm going to tell my employees what salary I'm going to give them, my recruits, excuse me. You can still give a band, so you don't need to say 25,000 full stop. You can say 20 to 27, for example, and negotiate depending on the skills. If you're talking about maybe a lower level job, that's one thing, because there isn't so much you can vary in that sense, except maybe, certain particular skills which might give a bit of a variance. But if you're talking about certain professional jobs, there could be a huge difference. It could be two people who have the same exact qualifications, but their experience is vastly different. If I go into a field of law, which I have no experience in, versus someone who goes into a field, graduated with me, but has been there 10 years in that field of law, going to be a huge difference. And this is where we're going to have to be very careful how we split these bands. And then obviously with employees which you already have, them asking information, that's going to be a big change as well, because not only do you have to give your information to employees about salaries if they request it. That's how it is in Germany, for example, but employees clearly don't really exercise it. What's going to change now is that you not only have to give the information when requested, you are obliged annually to inform their employees of this right. You are obliged to once a year, exactly. You have to remind them, tell them, listen, you have this right to request. They will. Now that they know, and it costs them nothing, so they're going to request it.
Yes.
So you have to be really prepared to make sure, exactly, on the board, that's the word. You have to really make sure that your stuff are in line, because if you don't, you're going to have huge issues with equal pay. And like I said, this law is specifically aimed at gender, but in Malta, thank God we're already one step ahead, not just between the genders, but also between employees themselves, whatever their gender. It could be woman, man, or even a woman who makes more than a man, which is usually, we think of it the other way around, but it could be that way as well. And that's, in a way, the only way how we're going to get to equality, real equality, because it's not just bringing women up to the level of men. If a woman
it's just looking at it on all parts.
Exactly, that's what equality is, essentially, and that's how it always should have been, but unfortunately, that's not always the case. But we're getting there, thank God.
We are.
So these are, a few of the implications which we can see from HR
point of view.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we ran a research with Esprimi, and this was March 23, and to the general public. But what really, to me, fascinated me from the research, and it was a mix of genders we went out to. 91% of the respondents actually do believe already that vacancy ads should have the salary out there. So it's the public is ready. From an HR point of view, we have to do the homework, so maybe slightly less ready. And again, not declining the fact that it's a good thing in reality, because the goal is good. The process might be slightly a journey. Okay, so moving to you, Karl, from what we've picked up through from Patrick, what strategies, in your view, can HR departments, and again, with all of your experience, can HR departments employ to effectively communicate pay gaps and disparities within their organization?
First of all, I think the first important thing that each organization needs to do is to actually analyze its own figures. Start with that. Not just assume, no, we don't have a problem, or everything is fine. Analyze. And then if there are disparities, understand why. Because at a point in time, one could be everything is there, you don't have any issues. If you have small numbers in certain departments, one resignation or one recruitment can destabilize the whole balance. So that's important.
One extra negotiation, one desperate situation where we might need to push a bit more. You're right.
Then one legal case. That's where it gets scary.
Patrick seems a bit excited.
He's going to make more money out of it. But then have a structured process when it comes to performance management, which is clear and transparent to all the workforce. Salary entry levels and thresholds and parameters, which are communicated and transparent to everyone. And the important thing is that it's clear, it's understandable, all the employees can actually go through it and understand and have the possibility to actually query about it and understand it 100%. So everything is above board. And ensure fairness. That's key. really and truly, independently of whether one keeps the salaries a secret or not, employees discuss these between themselves and they will know.
Yes.
So might as well be upfront and make it clear, make it transparent, but build the process and publish it.
That's it. I think this is it. This is a real opportunity for us in HR to start preparing the talk. And it's an interesting one because I think personally, I don't know, I think I've been brought up with you don't talk money, but this is shifting it completely. And it's also interesting, if I go back to that research we did, is 55% of the individuals we did research do feel that there is a gender pay gap. So that's quite a shocking amount, you know, having 50% of possibly our own workforce thinking this is unbalanced is scary. And I think another statistic that came through is also the mixed vibe of openness. So yes, we're open to see it. It should be on vacancies. But then when we've asked the further question, do you feel comfortable? Is it acceptable to have your own salary published? It's 3 out of 5 who are thinking that I'm ready for this. So the ability to communicate. But as you said, let's make sure we have our house in order. And if not, let's cater for it. Let's really communicate.
And if I may, because we were mentioning also secrecy of the whole pay structure thing. Before it was very, very common that, not before, even today, we see a lot of contracts that say employees should not disclose their salary. Very, very common. It's like a confidential obligation, definitely. Sometimes it's in the contract, sometimes they just tell you during the interview, do not disclose it. Some people take it to heart and they actually do obey it, others don't. The question always was, can employers do that? The law never said you can't, but at the same time, there is the provision that, goes for equal pay and you can open a case on that basis. So there was always that question that, can you not allow me to share my salary? Because then how can I enforce that right, which I have at law, if you don't allow me to do so?
Yes.
The directive has actually solved that question and it tells us you cannot prohibit employees from disclosing their salary. It's
okay, so that's another little homework for anyone in HR. Go back to your contracts, make sure.
And if it's there, forget it.
Even
if it's there, forget it. Okay. The law will trump. The law will trump once it comes in. So that's it.
Okay, it's a very good point you brought forward. Thank you for that. Okay, so Karl, in your experience, when it comes to resources and tools from an HR point of view that you can really use to be able to assess and address these pay disparities, what have you used till now, and what would your guidance be here?
So, as we said, it's monitoring. I think it's very important to do job evaluations, do proper job evaluation exercises to understand the level of responsibility assigned to each and individual role, and assign pay ranges to those roles eventually, and ensure that those ranges are respected if possible. Obviously, market forces do come and play, and one can't forget those, of course.
Yeah. And I think that's what pushed
the
market into an unbalanced state. Yes.
Have clear remuneration policies, clear performance management policies, but the job value evaluation exercises is critical. Having performance management exercises which are transparent, public in the sense how the mechanism works.
Yes, and I think that's one that not everybody does. Is that so? The internal branding of we are doing a job evaluation. This is the process of doing it. This is what we are looking at. Is I think it's part of the benefits you could be offering employees. It's an opportunity.
The employees have a vested interest because they want the company to be successful because they will gain out of it.
Exactly.
So it's in their interest to understand how the company is operating, how the company is functioning, and how can they develop and improve themselves. It's a journey. So it's important that they understand the journey.
Yes. Excellent. And so how do you think, in your experience, again, you're clearly, you have experience with job evaluations and it's something you believe in. How do you think employees typically react to increased pay transparency in the workplace? Is it welcomed? Is it they have an interest? Yes, but what's your thought?
Like you were saying earlier on, it's a double-edged sword. As long as I get to know what the ranges are, it's fine. But I don't necessarily want others to know what I'm getting. So obviously, we're not saying that we will publish each individual salary. It's just about ranges and salaries. But it's always a double-edged sword, even from a recruitment perspective. For example, if we're publishing, obviously we'll need to see the transposition eventually and how it will get to it. But if we start advertising roles and at the outset specify a range of salaries, it has its benefits because people who are at a much higher salary don't waste time applying, don't waste time for themselves and for the organization as well.
Yeah.
But from the recruitment perspective, you might be missing out on someone who did not apply because he's already exceeding that threshold.
And it does become about money like that.
It becomes only about money. So it's a double-edged sword. I think by and large, but it's positive because it enforces transparency, enforces equality, and equality not just in the sense of gender equality. There could be other factors like age discrimination that comes into it, race, and all that. So it should be transparent and fair with everyone independently.
Yes.
If you're good enough and you've got the skills, you've got the aptitude, the knowledge, whatever, then you're good for the role, independently of...
Yeah. Yes. And I think that's a very fair point, actually, because it's true. We weren't just talking man versus woman, man versus man. It's age, it's background. And I think that's where we're doing it right, in fact, on the Maltese front. Go ahead.
Then there's the human element one needs to be aware of, because once we start publishing ranges, all applicants will expect to go to the top end of the range, and it might not necessarily be realistic. So, but really and truly, it's human nature.
Yeah.
If it's 20 to 25, then I want the 25.
Yes.
So I don't want the 23.
The problem is, where's the starting point going to be in the employee, in the recruit's mind? Obviously, the HR will definitely know where the starting point and the end point is. For example, if you got a master's, you're going to go 23, 24. If you don't have a master's, maybe you start at the bottom. But the employee, how will they know that? So then even that needs to be communicated as such, the criteria. And then once the employment actually happens, that those criteria are actually legally required from then on.
And exactly that's why job evaluations are important, having a structured approach, establishing criteria. So it's like having a standard.
Yes.
Very much the word transparency, there it is. It doesn't explain it anymore.
True. And it's also, I think, there is when we're talking about objective, you get the objective factor from a job evaluation. The factors are set. It's, I mean, as Mdina, the way we work is it's really nice. It's really clean. You know what you're being. The tool does it for you, and I think using a good group of people to input the data, because obviously it needs to be data put in properly as well. I think that really adds that value. I think the other opportunity in my mind would be when you have that range. Obviously, I'm going to put my trainer hat on, but that's the best opportunity to talk about how am I going to help you grow, both financially and let me help you instill more skills. Let me help you want more for yourself. So I'm looking at it maybe with the challenge on opportunity, but to me that is like grinta exactly all the way. Find a way to make more.
Fair enough. To give you that benchmark, sort of.
Totally.
To move ahead.
Totally, and that's it. We need to make sure that it's being used as an empowering tool, though, not as a I'm stuck here or I've started at the bottom. Excellent. Okay. So coming towards the end, maybe Karl, you can support me on this, but any other ways that companies can ensure that pay transparency efforts really align, like you were saying, on the broader diversity of things? So equity, inclusion goals.
Basically, one needs to eliminate bias and preconceived ideas. By having everything structured, you have policies in place, mechanisms in place which basically determine how you're going to select an individual, what are the criteria, score them properly, and move on that. Basically, you're eliminating the bias as much as possible, and making it transparent and fair.
Yes. And it's a nicer experience for everyone else in the process of it. It's true. I think the cleanliness that comes out through this is going to add value to organizations. Okay. So one last one for you, and I'll open it to Karl, but of course, Patrick, feel free to add in your voice. But looking beyond pay, because this is, I think, look, if I step back, the beautiful thing about HR in the past few years is that it's become less about pay and more about everything else we do for employees, the brand we put forward, the values we put forward, the contribution and the experience of an employee. And in fact, probably the only pain point to me seeing this come through is, Lalo, now we're talking about pay again, which is, it makes the game a bit dirty. So looking beyond pay, how can organizations leverage this directive to foster, more inclusion and really have an equitable workplace and a good culture?
It will depend a lot on the size of the organization. That will be key. The bigger the organization, the more structured, but the more possibilities as well. I strongly suggest that the general manager, chief officers of the various organizations listen to their HR professionals and understand what's happening. And the important thing is to start now, as Patrick said earlier on, preparing.
Yep.
And obviously, if there are issues, one should not expect to solve them within a week. This will take time.
Yep.
The issues have been created over a period of time.
True.
Let's give the organization time and the employees as well to adjust.
The transition.
And transition into the correct way of doing things.
True.
But we need to start now.
Yeah, yes. And that's it. I think, sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
no, I was going to say, because bouncing off of this line of thinking, it's going to require a lot of reorganization in certain entities.
Yes.
So that's why it's really, really good to plan ahead and to educate, because that's the most important thing. Start reading up. You don't need to actually read the law,
You can listen to this podcast.
You can listen to this podcast. That's the first step, it gives you the idea. But, Google, the EU has so many info charts as well, like infographics as well, like really easy to see, really easy to understand. It gives you a good idea of what you're talking about. If you need further advice, look for further advice. But it's really easy to Google and start to understand what's going on, at least to get the ball rolling. But yes, as David was saying, it's very, very important to start ahead, because if you don't, you're going to have a problem. Same thing as the GDPR. I'm going to use that example again.
Totally.
Everything
I think
last
we should
minute.
have learned.
Exactly. Let's learn from that, please,
Yes.
HR guys. Thank you.
And if not, we'll help you.
No, we're here to help. We're here to help, not just to sue, guys. We're fine. We'll be okay.
But that's it. I think let's make it a celebration of equality. Let's make it a celebration of empowering people with their value and giving them an opportunity to really understand range and growth. And I think that's the less dirty version of this phase. Okay, super. So Karl and Patrick, thank you very much for joining. Thank you for the wealth of knowledge you brought forward today. Thank you for making it simple. You behaved.
I tried. Thank you. I appreciate that.
And thank you, listeners, for joining. We hope you'll join us for another episode next month. If you have enjoyed it, please stay subscribed. We truly believe that the journey to success is even better when shared. Until next time, thank you.